Hi.
Hello, how you doing?
All right. It's been ages since we've done this. It feels like all the last few Sunday nights have been taken up by all sorts of other things that were a little bit more serious.
Lots of very important stuff has been happening on those Sunday nights, so let's be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And we've had tremendous. I think we've had tremendous feedback also from people on the things that have happened over the last few Sunday nights. So that's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Succos. We've had very, very positive. I don't know about you, but I've had very, very positive messages from most people.
Yeah, there's been a lot. So a lot of the messages that have been received are around obviously the nature of the services and the fact that they're not quite the same as every year, but in some ways, some people have been able to find some nice parts of it that they never thought they'd come across. So lots of different comments on safety, on how things, generally speaking, ran to plan, and a lot of planning went in behind that. And again, massive thanks needs to be given to all the members of every team, but
Safeguarding team and the
safeguarding,
safety team,
health and safety, the
and
site
Paul and
manager,
Ian.
the office staff, the executive, the rabbi, the chazan. There were just
They've
so many.
worked very, very hard. It's unbelievable how hard they've worked actually that in getting this together and just making it work. I mean,
I
I
think
was in them with the office and I was in the office and I was watching them and then taking all the information and collating it and making sure that everybody else has somehow a place and the bubbles will have room in their bubbles and that everybody has a service to daven at and that the service that they're davening at is where they want to be. It's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, not that any one person deserves more praise than another. However, I have to honestly say that our president, Mr. Ian Creek, worked tirelessly, and the amount of devotion that he put into just making sure that every service was running. On Kol Nidre, when we had a later service, he could have gone home at that point, but he stuck around. He's honestly, dedication is not gone unmissed, and people really appreciate it, and I do for sure.
Yeah. Also, Gary came out pretty big. Also, that then we had a new Baal tefillah, and then lots of different tefillahs, and then staying for this one and blowing show. A lot of stuff. Really, there's a lot of talent within our community, and it's great to be able to harness it.
It's fantastic, and everybody's got their own unique style. Gary's got a beautiful voice, but a very almost unique choral style that he's got, and it was just beautiful to hear. It's just something different. I think everybody took something else away from the particular service that they were at. And there was plenty going on, and there's been plenty going on around the campus for the past couple of weeks. I think the important point is, and this has been raised by more than one person, is now that we shouldn't take it for granted, first of all, and we shouldn't let standards slip, and we should try and sort of, because we can get relaxed with this. It's almost like coming back into
we've got this
as well. Yeah,
we've got this. We know what we're doing now.
So we shouldn't relax too much on it, and we need to keep up on it. But it's been a real experience. I don't think we'll forget this year.
Hi, Sheila.
Good evening, everybody. Right, so to our main topic of tonight, happiness. Now, Succos is always a time that is associated with happiness, and in general, it is a bit of light relief, isn't it? Anyway, after the Yomim Noraim, where you've got where basically in shul you're listening to the number of different ways that we can meet a very unpleasant end, and we focus on that in some of the tefillahs to focus our minds as to ultimately what can go wrong. We also spend a lot of time apologizing for the things that we did wrong, and almost I don't want to say begging, but praying for forgiveness and something better in the year to come. And then Sukkot comes along as a relief to all of that, to these moments which should be taken extremely seriously, and they are, and they're very often they're called days of awe. Because you know, you should be in awe at that time, and you very often are. They're very overwhelming. And Sukkot leading up to Simchas Torah has always been a happier moment. It's also something that, from a Jewish tradition point of view, it's one of the more pleasant of the festivals, because you've got for kids, this is a phenomenal time of the year, because you have these very real symbols that you get to live and breathe. You get to build a sukkah. You get to eat in. It's ridiculous, but in England, you get to eat in the garden in October. You know.
I mean, Israel is the real place to be. Have you been Sukkot in Israel?
Yeah, no, completely.
Because I mean, I remember our next door neighbors. They had like 8-year-old, 9-year-old kids, and they were going around and they're taking apart pallets and putting together a pallet to turn it into sukkah in their garden. And everybody has their own. I mean, Sukkot is just phenomenal. Of all the Yom Tovim, probably in Israel, my favorite one by far.
Yeah. And it is, and the weather is just correct over there, because it's not too hot and it's not too cold. It's just that nice time of the year. But over here, to celebrate Sukkot to the full, you need to be an absolute diehard. You need to be really dedicated to sit out there, and some people sleep out there in any weather. But it's one of those times of the year where you've got so much going on in terms of the sights and the sounds and the smells of even one of the smells for me is wood, because my father used to build a sukkah out of plywood every year, and it smelled like sawdust for a week, you know. These are some of the things that you remember as a kid, and they come back to you as an adult, and they stick with you. And then obviously you've got the things that are entirely impossible to explain sometimes to a Gentile. So, for instance, on Yom Tov, I was doing security outside Shul, and Daz and Kenny said to me, "Hey, what are those things that they keep bringing in? They're walking in with these snooker cues. What's going on?" And we had to explain exactly what it was and exactly what it was for. And when you explain these things, it sounds crazy. But actually, to Kenny, it made a lot of sense, because there are some things in Christianity which obviously have been taken from Judaism in terms of the palm branches and Palm Sunday that they have. So there's a lot of similarities that they can see, but these are things that are peculiar only to us. And it's also one of those times of the year where it's a beautiful mitzvah to carry out, because it's so strange. And it takes that leap of faith to sort of believe in the symbology behind it and the meaning of all of these different things. But happiness is one of those things that is easier to talk about than to achieve sometimes, particularly in this day and age, where I think a lot of our happiness is fleeting. It's very superficial sometimes, and in the world of social media and everything else. A lot of our happiness is based on conforming to what other people want us to do, how many likes we get, how many followers we have, how many people are watching this. 22. That makes me happy. That makes me happy. And so it's in this world, to talk about happiness, you know, that's not true happiness. It's usually just very skin deep. But we thought it would be a good idea to look at it from the Torah's perspective, and particularly what this time of the year means in terms of happiness. So over to you.
All right, let's start. I think I'm going to start with something that you mentioned, because I think that's a really important point. Starting with social media. I think social media is really something. Oh, it's just vibrating already. I'm going to just turn off the vibration on this, because it takes my attention. There you go. That's it for social media. So social media is one of those things that really takes people, you know. It's interesting. I was speaking to my wife about it just yesterday, because I spoke about this in shul on Sunday, and we were discussing the fact that some people make extensions, and David, I'm sure for you, you know, selling houses, people are constantly asking you when they're buying in the area of Sedgley Park, can this be extended, and where it can be extended, and then will I need
has it got potential?
Has it got potential? That they'll always ask you that. How many times have you been asked that question?
I'm going to tell you now, everything I sell has potential. You
Of
might
course.
not be able
Yeah,
to see it,
everybody
you may
has it,
never find it, but it has it, let me tell you.
There we go. That's how we do it. That's why you're a salesman and I'm a rabbi. Okay. So we were discussing, and then the question often comes up is how people can afford themselves an extension. And I was saying to my wife, do you think the question actually comes from a certain amount of jealousy that people have? And she was saying, yeah, she does think it comes from a certain amount of jealousy, because who really cares how somebody can afford themselves something? It's only like, wait a minute, I work just as hard as he does, and I can afford an extension. And how come he, who doesn't work as hard as I do, actually could afford an extension? Something's wrong over here. The world isn't fair. And I think one of the things that brings our happiness down tremendously is this feeling that the world isn't fair, and that we feel that we've gotten a raw deal. And I think social media has done more than almost anything else to fuel that. Now, I don't know about you, but I've seen people that have these pictures on social media and they look like they are the happiest people you can find. You know, you see them with their wife and they're taking a picture on the top of some kind of mountaintop in the middle of some kind of Greek island with the sun in the background and the sparkling blue sea. And you think to yourself, amazing. Except that they came to see me before that holiday and we're discussing getting divorced, right?
It's amazing what a holiday in Greece will do for your marriage. It's phenomenal.
Or what it won't, you know. I mean, I've made that up. That's actually not true, but I know people that are like that. I do know people, they put on Facebook, they have this like great presence. And everybody is watching all the pictures that go up about them. Look at his kids, how cute they are. And look at his wife, how beautiful she always looks. And look how handsome he's always looking put together. And they're always looking so great. And they're always looking so fantastic. But the truth is, it all depends until you come to somebody else's house. And then you look around. And then suddenly it's not really like that. You know, one of the favorite things I like to say, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I remember when I was a kid, one of the things that always used to get to me is I used to go to my friends' houses, and my friends' mothers seemed just so much nicer than my mother. Because like whenever you went there, do you know what I'm talking about? Whenever you went there was nosh forever. There was never a time where they were like, you know, no, we're having cucumbers now. It wasn't like, you know, can we have chips? No problem. How about crisps? Yeah. Pretzels? Yes. Milkshakes? No problem. You know, 3 of them. Have some more. And they're throwing everything at you. No matter what you did, you could take that milkshake, shake it up and down, and throw it at the wall, and they'll walk in and go like, oh, that must have been a mistake. We'll clean it up later. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that happens when you're a kid.
But I'll tell you when that disillusion, you know, when that whole illusion burst. I remember that I once spent a night at his house, at the same kid's house, and his mother had an absolute cow about something. I'm like lying in my bed, and this screaming that I heard from the room next door, I was like, oh my goodness me, she's about to kill someone. Literally thought so. And then I turned to my friend and I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, that's my mom. And you're like, no, your mom is the crisp lady. Your mom is the lady that you can literally pour strawberry sauce on a white carpet and she says nothing. He goes, no, not my mother. My mother's strict. My mother's difficult. And then you realize, for the 2 hours that I'm at his house, she'll act like super mom. But at one point or another, that bursts. And at one point or another, the truth is that bursts in everything. So when you look at social media and you look at other people and you feel like, oh, they have everything or they have the kind of thing that you really want, you're only seeing a snippet. You're only seeing a tiny little droplet of what's really going on in their life. And you'd have to walk a mile in their shoes to know that maybe those shoes are not as comfortable as they seem. Do you know what I mean? And to me, that's the first thing I would say about happiness. And I think that social media has done us a tremendous disservice in that. And we've bought into it.
It's made us, and it's trained us. We know what we need to do on social media in order to get the reactions that we want from people. We know what to say to wind people up. So it's a great tool if you're looking to pick a fight. Social media is the place.
Absolutely.
And if you're looking for that pat on the back, you can also get it. But as long as you conform to everybody's sort of ideal of what it is that you're meant to do. But in order to sort of achieve true happiness. There are different forms of happiness, aren't there? So there's contentment, there's happiness, and you know, when I think about back to sort of my childhood, and I think about what is happiness, the happiest person I ever knew was
Yeah.
probably my grandfather, my late grandfather,
Oh, is it?
because he to me embodied that saying from the Talmud that, you know, the who is rich, the person who is happy with his lot and
Yes.
content
Yeah.
with what he has. And I always remember when I first got a job and I first started working, he would ask me. He came from this day and age where nothing was guaranteed, not your income, not your job, not your status, nothing. And I think they came from very different generation where happiness and contentment, you didn't have a right to be happy with work necessarily. Today, we encourage our kids to grow up and to be content and not to do any job unless they're 100% happy that this is their dream and their wish. But life isn't like that. I remember when I got my first job, my grandfather would never ask me how work was. He would always ask me, "Is there work?" And that tells you, you know, in that day and age when they were growing up, that was the question. Do you have work? Are you able to pay your bills? Are you able to put food on the table?
It's interesting. Maybe in Corona that has come back somehow.
I think so, a little bit, in terms of what we ask people when we ask them how they are. We now actually do care how they are. We know that people can't survive being isolated. We know that people sometimes struggle to survive on their own. I think it's
I'm
made us.
talking about work also. I think people nowadays, they're really, you know, if you have a job and you've not been laid off because your sector is still somewhat functioning within our economy or what's left of it during Corona, then you're really lucky.
Yeah.
And people are very happy, and they'll say, you know, are you happy at your work? They're like, I have a job. Baruch Hashem, I'm working. You know, I know so many people that have been laid off. So many entire industries that have just gone by the wayside.
And that leads you to a very different kind of happiness, because you realize that the right to be, you know, entirely happy with all your career choices and how hard you have to work and whatever it may be, it's not all in your hands sometimes. You know, it's not all going to go the way that you want it to, despite some of your best efforts. But from a religious point of view and from a Jewish point of view, this principle of joy, particularly is brought out in the service of God.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and again, how do you achieve that after coming through a very difficult period of time where there's been a lot of sort of major world events that have made the world a less hospitable place to live in? How do you effectively achieve that sense of joy right now?
Right. So I think that's an interesting question, but I would go back maybe to what you said. And I think in the same way that we don't really have a ticket to happiness as far as our job is concerned, you know, I mean, I know people that, for example, that, you know, I remember hearing once this saying, and it's probably true, that not that many people, you know, starve because there's nothing to eat, but many people starve sometimes because of their pride. So there will be some, you know, again, it's a hard one to swallow, but sometimes there might be some jobs out there. I know people that have started working in shops and then sort of stacking shelves, and people say, oh, come on, you used to be a ganze knacker, etc.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to let go of the fact that you're a knacker, okay, we'll come back to that, Chava. We'll have to come back to that. You know, being willing just to say, look, I need to survive. And so the fact that I knew a guy in New Jersey that was where we lived, where my grandmother lived. He was a plumber, and then somehow he invested in real estate, and it went meshugah. He became really, really wealthy. And I remember seeing pictures of him with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he had sponsored big Lubavitcher events. He was massive. And he built this massive house. He did everything. And somehow he made a wrong move, and the whole thing fell apart. Everything. He just went back to being a plumber. And people were like, but how could you go back to being a plumber when you were this millionaire mogul. Like, now you're sort of rummaging through people's toilets. And he was like, this is what I was. This is who I am. This is who I remain. I had money. I didn't need to do it. I don't have money. I'll do it again. And that, the fact that he's not standing on his laurels, that he's willing to do that, that's fine. But that gives him a certain contentment. And I think in the same way in a job market, that's true. I think sometimes we expect that God owes us a certain amount of happiness. God, you owe me a good marriage. You owe me healthy children. You owe me a job, and you owe me a roof over my head, and you owe me money to be able to pay my bills. And I don't know if that's true. And I think the more we feel entitled, the less we're going to be happy. And the less entitled we feel, the more even the small things, like Chava says, having a latte can make you happy. Well, how can having a latte make you happy? Because having a latte can make you happy. When you don't feel entitled and you say, I feel like I need to pick myself up. Okay, I'll have a good cup of coffee now. Great. This latte has made me happy. I know we're going to talk about deeper happiness than the happiness of a latte, but I'm saying that even that could be the thing that makes you happy because you're not feeling entitled. And in life, that sense of I deserve everything will make you very, very unhappy when you don't get it. And let's be honest about it, you cannot get everything in life. You cannot have the perfect wife, the perfect kids, the perfect job, the perfect car, the perfect house, the perfect friends, the perfect in-laws. It's impossible. Somewhere along the line in that list of things that I've just said, and then many more, there'll be a lot of other people. There'll be something that'll go wrong. It's almost unreasonable to expect that in that long list of things that I mentioned, where so many things can go wrong, that everything should go right. So if you get rid of that sense of entitlement, you already feel like, it's been a difficult time. I've not had maybe somebody's not had a job recently, or somebody's not been able to see his friends or her friends as often as they want to, or been able to go out and been able to see their family. And I think the sense of entitlement that we have, it says, I deserve to see my family, and therefore it's been stolen from me that I can see my family. Well, if you feel like that, you're going to feel very, very unhappy. But if you feel, look, I've been blessed to be able to see my children and my grandchildren, and that blessing has temporarily been put on hold, but I will get it back, hopefully, at one point or another, those are two very, very different attitudes. But they come because one sees it as a sense of entitlement, and one sees it as a blessing that they've been granted temporarily.
So it's a difference of perspective and how you see everything.
Absolutely.
And I think also this idea of lasting happiness, that happiness needs to be constant and it needs to be there always, and it's not going to be there always, and there are going to be times where it's harder to keep that up.
Well, it depends what you define as happiness.
Okay, so take us to a deeper sense of happiness then.
So I think going to that sense of contentment that you spoke about before, there's a great happiness within that, and that contentment can last. So when we speak about happiness, specifically when you speak about happiness, as Manson was saying, within the context of, for example, some of the Mussar Sfarim, some of the Jewish ideology Sfarim and character building Sfarim, they will speak a lot about bitachon, trust in God. And to say that I trust God is good, and I trust that God has my best interest in mind. And so I will do whatever I can, and then I'll leave it up to God to do whatever he feels is right. We have as children, for example, I know this is a very simplistic mashal, but people say it anyway. As children, sometimes we went to the doctor, and our parents took us to the doctor, and our parents then let the doctor give us an injection. And sometimes as a child, you looked at them and you're like, how did you allow him to poke me with that needle? How did you allow him to do that? That hurt. What were you thinking? The answer is that after about 3 to 5 minutes, we realized that, after the hug that we received, after the shot, the worst thing was, I don't know if were you in charge of taking kids for injections, or was your wife in charge of that?
We kind of shared it. We split it.
In my house, it was my job. My wife didn't like it, so in my house, it was my job. And I think there is one where I think you give three. It says DPT. You give diphtheria and tetanus. You give like 3 injections. You
Yeah.
give them one, and they're like, "What the heck was that?" You do on the other hand, they're like, "What?" And then you do a third one. Then the kid looks at you, is like, okay, one's bad enough, but 3, what the heck is wrong with you? But after a while, like you just hug the child and you calm them down, and they realize, you know what? Daddy's never done this before, and he probably will never do this again. And Daddy has my best interest in mind. He's the one that feeds me. He's the one that clothes me. He's the one that baths me. He does all these things for me. And so therefore I can understand that even when that happens, it's for a reason. And it's for a good reason. And it is for a good reason. We've had I don't know if you were involved even in the discussions. I think it was just before COVID, there was a lot of arguments about the measles injections. Did you get it?
Yeah. I followed those. Yeah, it's something that I keep following these. There's always a lot of discussion. If you want to find 2 great arguments online and people that never ever run out of energy to argue with you,
yes.
2 things you can pick: Zionism and vaccinations.
Yeah.
These are subjects that there are experts on everywhere that want to tell you about it. Obviously very controversial subjects, but particularly when you look at vaccinations are going to become, I believe, more and more important to us in light of what's happened.
Absolutely.
Everybody in the first stages of COVID, we all talked about them working on a vaccine. They're going to be working on a vaccine. The Israelis are going to make a vaccine, and this one's going to make a vaccine. And we actually understand that the science behind vaccines is a lot more complicated than our simplistic view of it. And it takes years to synthesize these things and to make them safe. But I understand there are some people that have viewpoints on vaccines that generally speaking go against the accepted theories behind it. And I can't subscribe to that, but it's
neither can I, because as a parent, I still feel the responsible thing is to give my children these vaccinations. There are children that weren't getting these measles vaccinations, that were getting measles, and we had thought we had eradicated measles. When was the last time you heard of a measles case?
Yeah, very true. It's a bit like polio and things like that. It was a sight that was very common, when my parents were growing up, or grandparents certainly. But nowadays, you explain to kids what polio was and how people used to have difficult. It's crazy. They can't compute. So I think that gives us.
When you look, I'm sorry, I just got a little bit off the point there. So coming back, that as a parent, this is the responsible thing to do, and that even though it hurts your child, in the long run, this is what your child needs. And if as a child you have that trust in your parent, and you say, you know what, my father knows what I need, my mother knows what I need, and I trust that they will do the best for me and can do the best for me and will try the hardest to do that, then even when life throws me a curveball, then I know, but you know what? I can handle it. Because I believe that if I believe everything is ordained by Hashem, if I believe everything is ordained by God, there's a certain amount of serenity that comes with. Because you say to yourself, if I wanted to do a business deal and it went well, thank God. If I wanted to do a business deal and it flopped, you know what, then God didn't want me to have that deal. And and it sort of takes the entire burden off you. You do whatever you can and then say, God, I've thrown everything I have into this deal. I've done whatever I can. If it goes off, great. If it doesn't go off, you obviously don't want me to have this. Well, okay. So then when if the deal goes sour, if somehow, it doesn't work out, you can turn around and you can say, okay, God, you didn't want this to happen. But if you don't see it that way, if the deal goes sour, you said, what? I've spent tens of hours. I've made so many phone calls. I've made so many discussions. I got my solicitors and my mortgage brokers. And I told this one and I told that one and the whole thing for nothing. So then that's very, very frustrating. And if you can let go and let God, there's a certain contentment that comes with that. Certain happiness that comes with that.
And that is very much part of the view of, if you consider God in that as a father.
Yes.
So Avinu Malkeinu, that's basically what we're talking about. But if you and as a parent, as a parent, you want the best for your child, and so you will always go out of your way to protect them and to try and give them what they need and so on. So, and also as a parent, you want your child to be happy. So I guess one of the questions that you asked on the poster was, does God want us to be happy?
So the answer to that question is unequivocally yes. However, there has to be a caveat over there. And that is, we need to figure out what the happiness is that God wants us to have. And when we figure out that happiness, then we can explain it. So if you say, does God want me to be happy? Yes. Well, I will only be happy with £1 million in my bank account. God might say, all right, can't help you. That wasn't my plan. That's not what I had planned for you, and therefore I'm not willing to work with that. You can't dictate to God and say, well, I will only be happy when or if, because if I will only be happy when or if, then God says, but I don't owe you that happiness. Whereas we believe that God created this world really ultimately for Olam Haba, for the world to come, to give eternal happiness to those people that kept his will, and to give them bliss that is not available here in this world. We only live in a physical world. You will get over there a sense of bliss that is not possible to be felt yet here in this world. And therefore we say, if that's why God created this world, then God created this world ultimately for all of us to be happy, and for all of us to get the greatest reward possible. And the closest in that we can get is something that is above and beyond what we can understand. Now, you say to yourself, well, how will I navigate this world and be happy in this world? So there's two things you could say. Number one, maybe you'll be unhappy in this world, but you'll be happier in the next world. Or number two, which is what we said before, coming back to it, is you can try to create a sense of contentment within yourself, that even as you're going through difficult times, you can still be happy in inverted commas. And again, that happiness, when we spoke about Breslav, that was on the poster as well.
Yeah.
Happiness doesn't mean dancing. I think people misunderstand that. Like, if you think that even though it's Hashem Azim, you think that the people that run through the street dancing, that they're necessarily happy, they're not. I think one of the things that struck me the most, I don't know if this ever struck you, but I remember when this happened. As a teenager, I loved Robin Williams. Did you like Robin Williams when you were a teenager?
Yeah.
And I thought he was absolutely hilarious. I remember him from different films, Mrs. Doubtfire and Good Will Hunting, and then, at stand-up comedy. He was an absolute comic genius, the man.
Yeah.
I think even with, Good Morning Vietnam, they had originally scripted him, and he just went off on one. And they just said afterwards, well, let's just let this guy go off on one, because he's much funnier than any script that we ever wrote for him. The guy was just absolute.
Yeah, a real rare talent.
A rare talent in humor. Really a rare talent in humor. And the fact is, the man who was the rare talent in humor, when my brother told me that he committed suicide, that to me was like, what? This is the funniest guy that I know. How can the funniest guy that I know, that can get hundreds of thousands of people around the world, millions of people to laugh at his jokes, feel sad enough that he would take his own life? And that really, so it's interesting to sort of take that into perspective. I often heard this story as a child, that they used to say that there was this fellow who came to a doctor and said to him, I'm feeling unhappy. What would you recommend? He says, well, there's a great clown in the circus. Go watch that clown. He's hilarious. He goes, I know, but I'm the clown. Now, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard that story before. It's a famous story. But I think when I hear the story with Robin Williams, that's the story. You got the clown who's so unhappy, and yet everybody else thinks he's hilarious. And this guy, and you think, if he can make that many jokes, if he can be that funny, he must be the happiest guy you can meet inside. And yet he was upset enough that he was able to do that to himself. So happiness is, you look at Breslav and you see the guys, have you ever seen these guys on the street in Eretz Yisrael with the big vans, and the van stops and they turn on?
Yeah. So we should explain it for people that are not familiar with the site, because it's something you almost definitely don't see here. But if you're ever stuck in traffic in Israel and you pull up to the lights, very often there can be a van with Nach Nach Nachman written on the side.
Everywhere on the van. And it's worse than a hippie band with the flowers. I mean, it's must have 10,000
They
speakers.
stop at the lights, everything stops. These guys get out, the megaphone goes on, and they start dancing, and it's a crazy, crazy thing to see. And the first time you ever see it, you're a kid again. It's amazing. You've never seen such clowns. By the 10th time it happens, and you're trying to get somewhere in a hurry, you get slightly more annoyed at it. But the Breslav, they have this. They really take that ideology of simcha, and they try and bring it into, and I think they believe that by dancing they feel joy.
Yeah.
And it's sort
So
of one
some
of these
people would say that the outer actions then, make your inside feel that way. I'm not so sure. If I'm feeling down, I don't know that dancing is going to get me up. It's not, I don't believe that that's what we mean with Ivdu Es Hashem B'Simcha. And really, when you look at, and there's a reason why they're a fringe minority, when you look at mainstream Jews, whether mainstream Haredi or mainstream modern Orthodox or mainstream, religious Zionist Jews, you just won't find, in any of those, you won't find any of their leaders that behave that way across the board.
Do you not think that's because Ashkenazi Jews love nothing better than to kvetch and complain?
Even by the Sephardim, they don't behave like that.
Right, we're going to have a look at some of the comments just for a second because people are commenting, so let's just bring them in. Sheila Morris, if only people could be grateful for what we have and thank Hashem for what we are, we can enjoy everything that has been given to us.
Yes, that's what we were saying. That's what you said. Being happy with your lot.
That to me is the key to it, and honestly, that's why I think my grandfather was able to do it. I can only try and even have a smidgen of that. It's very, very difficult. Sheila then goes on to say, I know it is difficult to be happy when you are ill or in pain. It is.
But I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen also, I've seen very inspirational videos of inspirational individuals that throughout their illness, they've just become these role models to everybody. I remember we had a fellow in yeshiva, Tzvika Fliegelman, I remember him. And he had some kind of degenerative disease. And it was very, very sad because he didn't feel things. And he was like he almost had like palsy and everything. I don't know what it was that he had. And they used to bring him to yeshiva, and he used to sit, and he wasn't able to speak, or you just barely were able to hear what he was able to say. But he came every single day to yeshiva, and he learned, and he wrote a sefer, and he was like a mascot. And sometimes you watch this guy, and you thought, yes, people treated him like, he liked certain things because he didn't have feelings in his legs. They used to run down the hall with him and slam straight into the door with him. And you'd be like, oh my goodness me, what the heck are you doing with it? But the guy was in hysterics. And the first time you saw it, you're like, okay, call the NSBCC or something. What the heck is wrong with you? But somehow, that's what gave him happiness. He was such an inspiration to see that he came every single day to yeshiva, and he would be able to learn throughout all that pain and throughout everything that it had, that people said, well, if he can do it, then I can. My Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, of blessed memory, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir Yeshiva, and took the Mir Yeshiva from a mere 500-600 boys and turned it into Yeshiva of 5,000 with 10 buildings, etc., etc. They estimated that throughout his lifetime, he probably must have fundraised somewhere between $250 and $300 million. He had Parkinson's, and he had it quite bad, but he fought his way through this Parkinson's. And he was one of the happiest people that you could ever meet. He had a smile that was infectious, and you would watch him, and he would sit, and he would learn, and he would come to give a shir, and he had this terrible Parkinson's, and he had 3 microphones, one next to the other, so that when he shook and went back and forth, you would hear his voice no matter where he was shaking. But he gave this shir with such vigor and such zest and such happiness, where you said it's unbelievable to look at somebody who's in that amount of pain to be able to do that. And it made you think, well, if he can learn that way, I'm fully healthy. At least I can be happy with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible. It's about what you make of that illness and how you're willing to accept it or how you're willing to fight it. And I think acceptance is such a big point of happiness. As you accept your lot in life, things get a lot easier and you're able to be a lot happier.
So let's have a look at some more comments. Shifra, good evening. Sis,
Good evening.
humans have a need to thrive, not just to survive. The trick is to understand what really makes you thrive, usually not material things or what others have. Perspective and gratitude also really help, but sometimes you need to train your mind to remember these things when things aren't going so well. That's true.
Very good. Absolutely.
That
And then I think it's finding that everybody has to find that thing that makes them thrive. And whenever things are tough, you can always go to that. That'd be like your little box that you could always go to and say, okay, I'm having a hard day, but I'm going to do some of this and I'm going to feel better. And even that is a tremendous, that even that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, as Elaine and Richard Bermett say, isn't the challenge often recognizing what we have and to be happy and grateful? Sometimes you can run around the world trying to find what makes you happy, and it's under your nose. You already have it.
Yeah.
And sometimes seeing what other people don't have makes you appreciate what you have.
Absolutely. That's not a nice way of looking at it, but it's true.
It's true.
Sometimes that's the only way to realize what you have is by looking at what other people don't have and recognizing that I'm so lucky and I'm so blessed.
Phil Morrison, tonight they're out there even with Corona. So I think he's talking about Breslav.
Yeah, they probably are.
And Gideon, tonight is his 210th yard side. So I take it that they are. Yeah. Rodney, good evening, Rodney. They weren't so happy when they were stuck on the border of Ukraine.
Probably not.
Very interesting. I bumped into, I don't know where, but there were a whole load of Israeli boys that had got lost on the way back from the Ukraine to Israel. Apparently, if somebody had told them had they come through England, they could get back to Israel without having to go into quarantine when they arrived. But then Israel changed the law again. And I think anybody coming from anywhere then had to go into quarantine. But there were certainly every year around this time of the year, there is this massive pilgrimage, mostly from Israel. You don't hear that many people going from England.
I know some people that do.
I know a couple from Manchester.
Clive's son goes. Clive most Barkley has a son, Ben, that goes sometimes.
Yes, yeah. I think Ben is Breslav, right?
Ben is Breslav, yeah. Ben is an old Mancunian, and he's probably one of the few Breslavers that's an old Mancunian. So that's it's interesting that he's been to MGS and as a Breslaver.
Well, it happens. But yeah, so they go on this pilgrimage every year to Uman, which is in Ukraine. And yeah, I've seen some of the videos. It's crazy the amount of people that they normally have there. I don't know what it was like this year.
20,000. I mean, this year not, but in the previous years, it's been up to 20, 30,000 people. And I think this little town in Ukraine, Uman, that has I don't know what they have as far as an economy is concerned. This Breslav, the Breslav community actually keeps the entire Uman going. People have what are they called? Not HMOs, but
Ben was there this year. Yeah.
A lot of people rent out rooms as service accommodation for Breslavers who are coming from abroad, coming to see the Rebbe.
It's the Glastonbury of the Ukraine. It's their 1 month of the year where they get all their income is all from these people. It's a massive source of tourism. So to bring things full circle, if you like.
Wow, Clive said it's actually 40K plus.
Wow.
That's a huge amount of people. I think Clive said Clive, were you there 1 year also? I think remember Clive went 1 year with Ben. Is that right?
Must have been a great experience. But just whilst we're waiting for Clive to respond, to bring this full circle and back to why is Sukkot particularly that joyous time of the year? Why is Sukkot all about simcha? And other times of the year we've also got a little bit of joy. Particularly Purim is one of those times where again we remember that we should be happy.
Yeah.
Why particularly Sukkot?
So Sukkah is actually coming back to what we said before. The Sukkah is also known as the Tzila de Menusa, the shade of God. So God is sort of like, when you're in the sukkah, you're in God's shadow. He's sheltering under the shadow of his wings, whatever you want to call it. And, if you want to give it a metaphoric usage. Obviously, God doesn't have wings and there's no shadows, etc., etc. But, again, using the metaphor that way. So the idea being that specifically after a time where we've been together with God, sort of having this discussion of, I've done things wrong, I apologize, I want to come back to you, I want to do things right again. And then afterwards, God says, okay, we're straight again. Let's, sometimes I guess it's almost as if you've had somebody who's moved out, one of the spouses moves out and then moves back in. You move out, that's a pretty big statement. People fight and people argue quite a bit. There's plenty of bickering that goes on between couples. But moving out is already a very, very big statement within that relationship that, it's almost over. And then, you come to some kind of resolution and she moves back in. That's a very, very big sign. It's a very big symbol. And we're like moving back in with God. The sukkah almost symbolizes that. We had this discussion. We had some very serious conversations. And now let's go back to where we're at. Let's go back to where we're really supposed to be, right? And that's really what's so important about Sukkot, is that understanding and feeling the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu within the Sukkah and saying, you know what, I'm not surrounded by anything that's, very impressive and I got no roof over my head. But even though I don't have a roof over my head, I got you on top of me instead. And I feel much more secure knowing that you're there than knowing that I have some kind of slated roof. Because tiles are slate, okay, they're great. Make sure that we keep our house dry. But God's a lot more powerful than that. And the feeling and the embrace of God on Sukkot to be able to say, you know what? This is a special Yom Tov. This is a time where we've had our disagreements, our difficulties, and now we're coming back together again. And we're feeling together as one. That's a Zman Simchaseinu. That's a time of happiness. Yeah. Rodney also points out quite correctly, in biblical times it was an agrarian society, so it was a time when the harvest had been brought, and it was definitely happy times, absolutely, if the harvest was good. Yeah, 100%. And that's part of it. That's why Sukkot was called Chag HaAsif, Chag, the Yom Tov, where people gathered in their grain. So you have Chag you have Chag HaAviv, which is the spring. Then you have Chag HaKotzer, used to cut the grain, but the grain used to stay out in the. We'll get to Simchas Beis HaShoeva soon. Okay, we'll talk about that soon. So we used to keep the grain out, drying in the fields, and then finally, at the end of the summer, when the grain was finally ripe and ready to be brought in, they would bring it in, and that's the Chag HaAsif that Rodney is referring to, and it was a time of great happiness because now finally you got to reap the reward of all the work you put in. And it comes together with reaping the reward for all the work that you put in over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is work. For a lot of people, I'm not talking about from a rabbi's perspective. I'm not trying to sort of say, that's my busy time as a rabbi. I have to give lots of sermons after davening. I don't mean to work that way. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for every single individual should be work. And that people should be working on figuring out who they are, what they want to be in the next year, how they want to change or make themselves better next year, and improve their lives. That's the work we have Rosh Hashanah and of Yom Kippur. So now that you've done that work, Sukkot comes as a time for you to be able to maybe reap the benefits of what you've invested, of what you put in there. And that's a wonderful thing as well. So, Rodney, quite correct in pointing that out. And the connection over there. So we go back to what Shifra asked.
Simchas Beis HaShoeva.
So interesting. Actually, this year there are very few, if any. I don't know that there are any. I think nobody's willing to risk a Simchas Beis HaShoeva for a 10 grand fine. Although I don't know if they, it did look like I was. Pardon?
It used to be quite. Simchas Beis HaShoeva these days is far less than what it used to be, right? In the days of.
Oh, in the days of Beis HaMikdash, it was a really big deal. So basically, what they used to have a special shoeva mayan. They used to go and they used to pour water. They had a special water libation on the Yom Tov of Sukkot. They used to go down to to the Shiloach. Even nowadays, you have the Shiloach on the bottom of Jerusalem. You used to get the water from there. You used to come up to Jerusalem, and they used to use that water to pour it on the Mizbeach. And it was a tremendous time of happiness. And they used to party in Yerushalayim all night long, basically. Yeah. And so therefore, sorry, I've just gotten a bit of a cold. Non-corona related, just a cold. But it's okay. We're socially distanced through a screen. It's not going to come. I hope my droplets aren't coming blowing.
I only wish you better. Why don't jump to conclusions? I never said corona.
No, so I'm letting everybody know that that's not what it is.
I for one welcome your musical accompaniment every few minutes. It's fine.
Oh, very good. Okay, I don't, but I wish Anyway, so we used to have these special parties at night. I remember when I lived in Yerushalayim, they used to go on for hours and hours. You could go to certain of the Hasidic courts. You ever go to Toldus Aaron for that? You ever go in there?
I've never been. No.
Oh wow! They used to just go and go for hours and hours, just round and round and round and round. Like you go literally. It was unbelievable. And certain places you go 3, 4, 5 hours, unreal, and every single night. And then if you had a Hasidus that would have one of the, you had every different, every night you have one of those shpizim. You have special guests that come to the Succos. You have Amram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. So if that Hasidus had that name within its Hasidus, so for example, Toldus Aaron, on the night of Aaron, they made an extra big celebration. Yeah, it went absolutely haywire. Yeah, so it was really brilliant. I remember the 4 years I lived in Yerushalayim, we used to go from Simchas B'Sheva, Simchas B'Sheva, and even here they used to have them everywhere. We used to have them in every school. Used to have one for the faculty. I know that my kids were at Eitz Chaim every year had one. This year, sadly, they're not having one due to Corona. Mechina, where I've taught that they don't have one. I know Manchester Masifta, also known as Jewish Grammar, used to have one. They're not having.
Yeah,
one.
we used to. If you used to get dragged to it every year. Reb Lipper used to preside over Simchas Beis Shoeva, and it was the event of the calendar.
But then when the music started, it was great. I remember I had 1 or 2 great Simchas Beis Shoevas at Masifta. It's been really, really great fun over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Simchas B'Sheva. So the Simcha, that was the happiness of when they used to go. They used to pour that water that happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and that we reenact nowadays by having these great parties on Sukkot as part of it. Clive mentions another point over here.
Sukkot celebrates return of the clouds of glory after they were taken away from the man following the incident of the golden calf.
Right. So just to give a bit of explanation over there. What happened is that the Jewish people were surrounded by clouds of glory, and those were taken away after the Jewish people had sinned with the golden calf. They were forgiven on Yom Kippur, and then they were given back to the Jewish people on Sukkot. So there's actually a discussion in sort of, I don't know if we call it in halacha or in Jewish thought, whether the Sukkot the Torah says, Kiva Sukkos or Shaftis B'nai Yisrael, that the Jewish people sat in huts. Does it mean real huts, or does it mean that they sat in the clouds of glory? But definitely, so is when all Jews become Breslavers. Love that. Okay, maybe. So they received that, and that's why they had this. They had this Sukkot, is this celebration again of the clouds of glory returning. At least according to one of the opinions, that's what Sukkot is all about, of the return. And we sit in the Sukkah as a reminder of the clouds of glory as well. Again, remembering the fact that God enveloped us as a Jewish people as we were traveling through the desert, and we felt his constant love and his constant care for us as a people, his protection as a people. I think all those ideas coming together as Sukkot being a time of happiness, together with the idea of us being content and us being happy, and just realizing that, everybody here is blessed. And sometimes you get upset about certain things. I remember I got upset, I don't know, we were getting upset about my 4G, it wasn't working. And I said, that's like a first world problem. I think people in Nigeria don't complain about, I'm just choosing that out of a hat, but maybe people in Nigeria, they're not complaining about the lack of 4G, they just want clean water.
I'd encourage anybody that ever complains about a lack of 4G signal to watch the episode where I tried to interview Ian Creek. and then everything becomes much better. You realize it could be a lot worse than that.
We complain about a lot of things that are really, they're not really problems. And if you know what people go through in this world, you say, that it's a small issue. Life is full. A lot of our big issues are really a lot smaller than we make them, and we blow them up, and we create great tragedies, problems, etc., out of things that aren't really serious issues.
So the culmination and the sort of climax of Sukkot, though, is Simchas Torah.
Yeah, Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah together. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all about Simcha.
That's all about it, because there's no more mitzvah left. Then it's just God saying one more day. Let's just celebrate it together. Yeah. You should see what your sister wrote. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yes, the Ian Creek episode has gone down in history as the funniest thing we never intended to do.
And that could easily. Can you imagine if Ian Creek won a BAFTA award for that? Imagine how many thank yous you'd get at the end of that speech. I'd like to thank Alan and Pauline for cleaning the toilets. I'd like to thank Rick, who was the caretaker for so many years. I'd like to thank Paul, who now takes care of our building.
So this year's Simchas Torah is going to be a little bit more
tame.
What's the word? Subdued a little bit.
Yeah.
Tame. So as one of this year's Chatanim, what can we expect in Shul this year? Have we worked it out yet?
Sadly, not so much. I think as singing very loudly is prohibited. Dancing by touching hands is prohibited. Standing within less than 2 meters of people is going to be prohibited. It's going to really become very, very difficult. Really, very difficult. So, and I think what we have to realize is that, this is part of what we have to accept. That, look, sometimes, some years, this is what it's going to be. But I think we can still celebrate with the Torah in another way. And that's the important thing to realize, that you can celebrate with the Torah by learning Torah, not just by dancing with the Torah. Because some people, I think we often speak about this, that Simchas Torah is a great equalizer amongst Jews, and anybody can dance with the Sefer Torah. And I believe that to be true. Anyone can dance with the Sefer Torah. But I believe also that only the man or the woman that really knows what it's all about can truly dance. The other people, they're dancing, and it's a great, it's a nice dance. But, when you have different people who experience certain things and they go through things in their lives, those that really understand the repercussions of certain things and realize that they've been saved, they dance very differently than those people that are blissfully unaware.
Yeah.
So, Simchas Torah sadly is going. It's going to be. It's not going to be what we were hoping for this year. I was hoping. Come Pesach time, we were hoping that by Shavuos or latest by Rosh Hashanah, things will be back to normal. We can see now that this is going to be here for quite a bit longer. I can't imagine this even being away for next year Succos. I hope it is for next year Pesach. Sorry, Succos maybe, but Pesach. We've been told 6 months for sure. So we still got all the way to go to Pesach. Sorry.
But there's still so many wonderful things that are continuing to happen, and I think you've seen a lot of goodwill, certainly within Shul and the community as a whole, in terms of the support the different people have felt, and this people want it to carry on, people want it to continue, and it's been very, very nice to see it all come together. And I honestly hope that out of this sort of darker time that we've had, some of the lighter moments will continue to be with us, and we should appreciate them for all that they're worth, and really should sort of try and keep them on. Rodney, it's weird that because we have 2 days. First, the seriousness of Shmini Atzeres, and then the joy of Simchas Torah ben Israel with just 1 day. They start with the joy of Simchas Torah and finish with the seriousness of Shmini Atzeres. So how
Shmini Atzeres is a very strange day in Israel, because it's all sort of mushed into one. You have Yizkor, you have Akafos, you have Geshem, you have Choson Torah. It's just in Israel. I remember that we never kept 1 day in Israel because we were always planning on going back, and we were given the halachic ruling that we had to keep 2 days. But I remember my friends who kept 1 day, and it was all very, very, very strange. It just was very strange.
So in many ways, we're spoiled here. We get to celebrate each one in its own
right. And then Shmini Atzeres. Yeah, in a way, we are spoiled. Yeah.
Clive echoes. This year shows us what we have had, and look forward to when we get it back again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, Rabbi, I think on behalf of everybody, can I wish you a speedy refuah shalema?
Thank you very much.
Some chicken soup, maybe a lemon tea wouldn't hurt.
Yes.
Look after yourself. Don't sit outside in the cold too much.
Yeah, well, that's part of what gives me the cold. That's part of the reason I don't sleep in the sukkah, by the way, because I get colds too easily.
It's this truly is a seasonal cold.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining
week.
us. And I'm still putting Ian Creek forward for that BAFTA award. Schiffer, I'm with you all the way.
After what he's pulled off this year, he deserves some sort of an award. I'm going to try and.
Absolutely. I'm with you all the way.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. I don't know if we'll have anything next week, but the week after we'll be back to Sunday Night Live.
Back in action.
Absolutely.
Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.